Hey guys, my name is Jocelyn. I am a second year master's student at the Graduate School of Education in the University of Pennsylvania. Right now, I am wrapping up the last semester of my master's degree, and I'm basically just touching up the final capstone paper that kind of consummates my 2 years worth of study. However, as a book lover who has definitely made enough effort to ensure that I could wring out enough time for me to do leisurely reading and not just completely engulfed by schoolwork, I feel like it would be remiss of me if I don't give my assiduous reading journey a fair share of revisiting and reflection. So, in the past 2 years, aside from the textbooks, academic journals, and papers, and a few random glances at newspapers and magazines, I have read about a dozen books, and some of them are novels, some of them are nonfictions. So starting from today's video, I will make a series of videos to review all the books that I have touched upon in the past 2 years, or at least some of them that I would strongly recommend. So if you are like me, a second language learner slash a bookworm, you might want to check my videos out. So as you could see, those are some of the books that I've read in the past 2 years. I'm just showing this to you for reference. So the first book I want to recommend is called Bel Canto. Unfortunately, I don't have the physical copy of it because I read it in the electronic version. But still, the experience that the language provoked was no less visceral. So this is what it looks like on the cover of the paperback version of this book. I remember I read it when I was on a trip from Philly to Niagara Falls. I remember feeling rather drowsy with my friends on the bus that transported us from this east coast of city to the frigid northmost city in the United States. And even though the trip itself was rather exhilarating once we got off the bus, but still, you gotta admit that the bus ride was a drag. So, in order to kill the time, I alternated between sightseeing with a view limited by the scope of the window frame of the bus, and reading this novel. And actually, I was so entranced by this novel that even when the bus arrived at its destination, I still kind of wanted to stick around on the bus just so that I could finish the novel in one go. So the story starts from the mention of the leaders of a South African country, the name of which the author didn't reveal. And the leaders throw a party and invite a cluster of world famous politicians, high profile diplomats, and estimable businessmen into that party. One most important figure among those people is this Japanese businessman, Mr. Hosokawa, and the author leads us to believe that the whole point of throwing that party is for the leaders to kind of cajole and secure Mr. Hosokawa into a trading partnership with that country. And since they know that Mr. Hosokawa has a compulsive penchant for opera singing, they also invite the most famous soprano, whose name is Roxanne Koss, into that party to not only spiff up the atmosphere, but also to get into the good graces of Mr. Hosokawa. But in the midst of the party, when everyone is kind of relishing the beautiful, gorgeous singing of Roxanne Koss, a terrorist group assault the mansion, and they require to see the president of that country, who is in absentia. So, determined to at least procure some gain from their action, the insurgency group keeps all the guests hostage, and they demand a sizable ransom for the release of the guests. However, while the outside world and the country's government are in a stew, the life inside the mansion starts to take on some really dramatic turns. So the initial animosity, acrimony, and the brewing sense of tensions that feel like are going to explode at any moment start to turn for the better. They start to defrost and warm up into warmth and love. And while several pairs of couples start to form, for example, Miss Roxanne and Mr. Hosokawa fall in love with each other. The communication between whom is solely achieved through music and the assistance of Mr. Hosokawa's interpreter. And that interpreter also, interpreter and another girl, another member in the insurgency group, Carmen, also blossom into a beautiful love story. And in the last chapter, you can see this scene in which Miss Roxane is practicing singing with a newly found apprentice, who is one of the youngest members of the insurgency group. And then some of the terrorists and the guests are playing soccer ball in the backyard, and some of them are steeping tea, and some of them are planting in the garden. And you can see this really serene and utopian scene that's portrayed in the last chapter. So it reads, Miss Hosokawa laughed and kissed Roxane's cheek. Who could believe such a woman existed? He went to the kitchen to make her a cup of tea, and Caesar sat beside her on the piano bench, hoping that his lesson might be extended now that everyone was gone. So Caesar is the other another member of the terrorist group, who went under Roxane's apprentice. The rest went outside to play soccer or sit in the grass and watch the soccer game. Ruben is the vice president of that country. Ruben had been able to petition a spade and a small hand rake from the gardener's shed, which was locked, and he turned over the soil in the flower beds, which he had meticulously cleared of weeds and grass. Ishmael, another member of the terrorist group, Ishmael skipped the game in order to help him. He didn't mind. He never liked to play. Ruben gave him a silver serving spoon with which to dig. My father had a wonderful way with plants, Ruben told him. All he had to do was say a few kind words to the ground, and here they would come. He had meant to be a farmer, like his father, but the drought caught them all. Ruben shrugged and slipped his spade into the parched soil, turned it over. He would be proud of us now, Ishmael said. Farewell, people. The guests and the terrorists included were all like kind of enwrapped in this exultant utopian bubble of life. Just one sudden shocking blow kind of shatters the whole beautiful and blissful picture. The government kind of dispatched some military groups to launch a reckless and sometimes even indiscriminate carnage on the terrorists. And Mr. Hosokawa and Carmen are both dead in the Bedlam, so are all the other terrorist members. And you can see that all the guests are kind of grieving for the loss of their friends' lives in this really gut-wrenching, heart-rending way. So in one scene, when Caesar died of a gunshot, Roxane crouched beneath the piano, her voice sounding out the alarm. She crawled towards the boy, who she was sure was meant to be the greatest singer of his time, and covered his body with her own, lest anything else should happen to him. She could feel his warm blood soaking her shirt, wetting her skin. She took his head in her hands and kissed his cheeks. The ending was rather short and crisp, and after witnessing 300 words of pages of, the massive capacity of humanity to love and believe, you would hope that this would have a really epic level ending. By epic level, I mean that you would hope that, the characters would be able to live happily ever after. And since this happens in a fictitious world, your capacity for suspension of disbelief would lead you to believe that it would be possible that the terrorist group would eventually come clean, set things straight, fulfill self-redemptions, or acquire absolutions or stuff like that. However, the story didn't end that way, and hence the mismatch between the reader's wishful thinking and the heartlessly brutally honest reality. So why do I call it the reality? The author Anne Patchett, in an interview, revealed that the story was based on a real tragedy that happened in the Japanese embassy, and she read that story years before she started writing that book, and she kept wondering how people went about and processed things in that kind of intensive calamity. And then eventually she let the characters segue her into a deeper understanding of such human experience. So this is the thing that's really wonderful about writing. You get mystified over things or get really confused over your life, and then you take it to pen, and somehow miraculously you start to be able to integrate the writing of the problems per se with some solutions or at least some relief. So why do I recommend this for second language learners? Well, I know that there are a lot of learners who are huge fans of idiom learning or phrasal verbs or slangs, but there are also some learners who are a little bit cringy around that territory, and I totally understand that because, well, to some extent, idioms kind of create some confusions and reduce the level of intelligibility of the language. So don't feel like you're doing anything detrimental if you hesitate to, start learning more about idioms or getting yourself exposed to too many phrasal verbs or slangs. There are other books that are heavy on idioms, which I probably would touch upon in other videos, but just for this book, the language itself is spectacular, but it doesn't contain a lot of idioms, so that you would, probably find yourself falling into sobbing heaps after reading it for several hours without getting stuck from time to time on, idioms that are really hard to comprehend. And also make sure that you keep taking notes for new words or beautiful expressions, because, well, I know that reading makes learning an experience, and a really incidental experience, but at the same time, it would be more effective if you keep it intentional. So that's all for it for today's video. If you like it, you can give me a thumb up. I would definitely give myself a thumb up because this is definitely the premiere of my own YouTube cantata. And well, as you can see, as the video proceeds, the daylight starts from really bright to really dim, because I literally, I don't know, recorded for several hours from around 3 p.m. to, what time is it, like 8 p.m. For just like, I don't know, 10 minutes worth of video, and I totally get, that recording a YouTube video is definitely an arduous task, but it's still really interesting, and I would definitely keep at it. So thank you for watching, and see you next time. She never tired of these games.